Let me ask you a question that most people never stop to think about. How is it possible that two people can grow up in the same neighborhood, attend the same schools, earn similar salaries, and yet end up living completely different financial lives 20 years later? One of them is still struggling, still living paycheck to paycheck, still worrying about rent, still one unexpected bill away from a financial crisis, and the other one? They quietly built something. Not a lottery win, not a massive inheritance, just a slow, steady, almost invisible kind of wealth that grew over time until one day the difference became impossible to ignore. So what actually separates those two outcomes? Most people assume it must be talent, or intelligence, or maybe luck. But the truth is much simpler than that. And also, much more uncomfortable. The difference is what they did every single day with what they had. Small decisions, repeated thousands of times, because money rarely changes someone's life overnight. Instead, financial outcomes are usually the result of tiny choices made consistently over many years. And when those choices move slowly in the wrong direction, people drift toward financial stress. But when those same choices move in the right direction, something remarkable happens. Over time, staying poor becomes almost mathematically unlikely. Not impossible, but extremely unlikely. And once you understand why, you begin to see money very differently. But before we talk about the habit that makes this possible, we need to talk honestly about the trap that keeps millions of people financially stuck. Because most people who struggle financially are not lazy. They are not irresponsible. They are simply following a financial blueprint they were never taught to question. Think about it. You spend more than a decade in school learning history, literature, mathematics, science. But how many classes did you ever take about investing? How many classes taught you how money grows? How many lessons explain the difference between income and wealth? For most people, the answer is zero. So when people enter adulthood, they are handed money without ever being taught how money actually works. And when there is no financial education, people simply repeat the financial habits they grew up around. If their parents struggled with money, those patterns often continue, not because anyone intended it, but because those habits were never questioned. The typical financial blueprint looks something like this. You work hard, you earn money, you spend that money on your life. And if there happens to be something left over at the end of the month, maybe you save it. But most months, something happens. A car repair, a medical expense, a broken appliance, a vacation that felt justified after a stressful month, a purchase that seemed small at the time. And slowly, month after month, the savings never really grow. Meanwhile, something else quietly happens in the background. Your lifestyle expands. At first, it feels harmless. You get a raise, and suddenly upgrading your apartment feels reasonable. You earn a little more, and eating out more often feels justified. A slightly nicer car, a slightly better phone, a slightly more comfortable life. Each decision feels logical, but collectively, they create something called lifestyle inflation. And lifestyle inflation is one of the most powerful forces keeping people financially stuck. Because every time income increases, spending quietly rises to match it. Which means no matter how much someone earns, they never actually move forward. They simply run faster on the same treadmill. And layered on top of that is something even more powerful: consumer culture. We live in a world specifically designed to make you spend money. Advertisements everywhere. Social media feeds filled with lifestyles that appear perfect. Influencers showing you what success is supposed to look like. And the message is always the same. Upgrade, buy, experience more. You deserve it now. Modern marketing is extremely good at one thing: convincing you that happiness is always one purchase away. But there is another reason people stay financially stuck. And this one is easy to miss. Most people are only working for income. They trade time for money, they get paid, They spend it. Then they go back to work to earn more, again and again and again. But income alone does not create wealth. Income without assets is simply a treadmill. You keep running, but you never actually move forward. The people who escape that treadmill eventually discover something important. Wealth is not built from income. Wealth is built from what you do with income over time. And this leads to the habit that quietly changes everything. The habit itself is incredibly simple. Every single day, allocate a portion of your resources towards something that grows. That could mean money, investing a percentage of your income into assets that grow over time, stocks, businesses, real estate, anything that produces value beyond the hours you personally work. It could also mean time, spending time learning skills that increase your earning potential, developing abilities that make you more valuable next year than you are today. Or it could mean attention, actually paying attention to your financial life, tracking spending, understanding where your money goes, making conscious decisions instead of unconscious ones. The exact form this habit takes matters less than one thing: consistency, because consistency activates the most powerful force in personal finance: compounding. You have probably heard about compound interest before, but most people hear it explained in numbers, and numbers alone rarely capture how powerful it truly is. So imagine this. Someone begins investing $200 a month at age 25. Nothing dramatic, just a simple monthly habit. They invested in a broad market index fund. Historically, those funds have averaged around 8% annual returns over long periods of time. After 10 years, they have invested $24,000. But their account doesn't show $24,000. It shows closer to $37,000. $13,000 appeared that they never personally worked for. Now imagine another decade passes. After 20 years, they have invested $48,000, but the account now sits around $118,000, more than double what they personally contributed. Now something interesting happens. Growth begins accelerating because the money itself is now generating returns. By year 30, that account may exceed $300,000. By retirement, that same habit can grow into hundreds of thousands, sometimes even more than $1 million, from $200 a month, less than what many people spend on takeout, subscriptions, and impulse purchases. That is the quiet power of compounding. But here is something even more interesting. Compounding does not only apply to money, it applies to behavior. Every habit you repeat today quietly multiplies your future outcome. If you spend slightly more than you earn every month, that compounds. If you slowly accumulate debt, that compounds too. If you invest consistently, that compounds as well. And this is why so many people wake up at 40 or 50 years old wondering where their money went. Nothing dramatic happened, no single catastrophic mistake. Just thousands of small decisions, repeated in the same direction. Now imagine the opposite. Imagine two people again. One begins investing small amounts early, the other decides they will start later. At first, the difference between them is almost invisible. After 1 year, the investor has about $2,000. Not impressive. After 5 years, maybe $15,000. Still not life-changing? And this is where most people quit, because progress feels slow. But something important is happening beneath the surface. The system is warming up. Compounding is beginning to take hold. Fast forward 15 years. Now the investor may have $70,000 or $80,000, and suddenly the account begins growing faster because the money itself is generating returns. Fast forward another decade. The difference between the two people becomes dramatic. One has hundreds of thousands invested. The other is just beginning. And the difference wasn't intelligence. It wasn't luck. It was time. Time is the most powerful asset in wealth building. Not income, not brilliance. Time. Because time allows compounding to transform small actions into extraordinary results. Think about planting a tree. In the first year, it barely grows. In the second year, a little more. For a long time, it looks unimpressive. But underground, something important is happening. Roots are spreading, strength is building. Eventually, growth above the surface becomes impossible to ignore. Financial habits work the same way. At first, the progress feels invisible, but if the system is consistent, growth eventually accelerates. And suddenly the results look extraordinary, even though the process was simple. But there is another layer to this idea that most people overlook. Compounding is not just about money. It is about behavior. Every action you repeat today quietly shapes your future outcome. Spend a little more than you earn each month, and that compounds into debt. Invest a little each month, and that compounds into wealth. Ignore your finances for years, and that compounds into confusion and stress. Pay attention to your finances, and that compounds into clarity and control, which means the direction of your life is not determined by one big decision. It is determined by thousands of small ones. This is why wealth is rarely built through intensity. It is built through duration, not by doing something extreme for a short period of time, but by doing something reasonable for a very long time. That is the real secret behind most financially successful people. They are not chasing shortcuts. They are building systems. Systems that move their financial life forward a little bit every day. Saving consistently, investing regularly, avoiding unnecessary debt, improving their skills, living slightly below their means. Those decisions may not look exciting, but over decades they reshape someone's entire financial future. And perhaps the most encouraging part of this idea is that it does not require perfection. Everyone makes financial mistakes. Everyone overspends sometimes. Everyone experiences setbacks. But consistency over the long term matters far more than perfection in the short term. Because time smooths out many mistakes. The market has ups and downs. Life has ups and downs. But long-term discipline has an incredible way of overcoming short-term problems, which is why starting matters so much. The earlier the habit begins, the more time it has to work. But even if someone starts later, the principle still holds true. Progress is always possible. Habits can always change. Direction can always shift. What matters most is the decision to begin, because the real danger is not making mistakes. The real danger is doing nothing. Doing nothing allows inflation to slowly erode your purchasing power. Doing nothing allows years to pass without assets growing. Doing nothing locks people into the same financial position year after year. But action changes the trajectory, even small action, even imperfect action, because action creates momentum, and momentum creates change. Now imagine your life 15 years from today. You followed this system, not perfectly, but consistently. Your investment account now holds a number that once felt impossible, not because of luck, but because of thousands of small decisions made over thousands of days. Money no longer dominates your thoughts, not because you are unbelievably rich, but because you finally have something incredibly valuable: options, freedom, the ability to make decisions based on what you want, instead of what you can afford. And the quiet financial stress millions of people carry every day begins to disappear, because wealth, at its core, is not about luxury. It is about control. Control over your time. Control over your choices. Control over your future. And that future is built the same way poverty often is, through small decisions repeated every single day. So you do not need a perfect salary. You do not need perfect timing. You do not need to understand everything before you begin. You simply need to start. Start small. Start today. Start with whatever you have, because the most expensive mistake anyone can make is waiting. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is right now. Start the habit. Stay consistent. and let time do what it does best. Multiply small decisions into extraordinary outcomes. But there is another perspective that makes this idea even clearer. Imagine looking at your life from the future. Not next year, not 5 years from now, but 20 years from today. Picture the version of yourself who has already lived those years. That future version of you is looking back at the decisions you are making right now. And from that perspective, the things that feel small today suddenly look very different. Because when you zoom out far enough, patterns become obvious. A person who saves and invests even small amounts every month eventually builds momentum. At first, it feels slow, almost invisible, but eventually, the system begins working on its own. Investments start generating returns. Those returns begin generating more returns. And gradually, the effort required to maintain the system becomes smaller than the results it produces. But the opposite pattern is also true. Someone who consistently spends everything they earn may not feel the consequences immediately. For a long time, life can look completely normal. They may have a good job, a comfortable apartment, nice things, regular vacations. From the outside, everything appears stable. But underneath the surface, something important is missing. Assets. Because without assets, income alone must support everything. And that means the system is fragile. If the job disappears, the income disappears. If the income disappears, the lifestyle collapses. This is why financial security is not about how much someone earns. It is about how resilient their financial structure becomes over time. A resilient financial life has layers, savings, investments, skills, multiple sources of opportunity. Each layer strengthens the structure, and those layers are built slowly. The same way a building is constructed, brick by brick, decision by decision, day by day. Another way to understand this is through momentum. Think about pushing a heavy object. At first, it barely moves. The effort feels frustrating. But if you continue pushing long enough, the object eventually begins moving on its own. Financial habits work exactly the same way. Early effort builds momentum. Later momentum reduces effort, which is why people who begin investing early often reach a point where their investments grow faster than their contributions. At that stage, something remarkable happens. Their past decisions begin working for them. Instead of trading time for money every hour of the day, their assets begin producing value quietly in the background. That is the moment when the system truly begins working. And for many people, that moment feels almost surreal, because for years the progress seems small, but then suddenly the numbers begin changing faster. And what once felt impossible begins to feel inevitable. But here is something very important to remember. The goal of this process is not simply to accumulate money. Money is only a tool. The real goal is freedom. Freedom from constant financial stress. Freedom to choose opportunities instead of being forced into them. Freedom to take time when necessary. Freedom to design a life instead of constantly reacting to circumstances. And those freedoms come from stability. Financial stability changes the emotional experience of life. When someone lives paycheck to paycheck, every expense carries tension. Every unexpected bill creates anxiety. Every financial decision feels urgent. So, if there is one idea worth remembering from everything we have discussed, it is this. Your financial future is not determined by where you start. It is determined by the direction you move. And direction is always a choice repeated every day, which means the opportunity to change direction is always available. Even today, even with small amounts, even with small steps, because small steps taken consistently eventually cover enormous distances. And that is how financial freedom is built. Quietly, gradually, through habits that seem small today but become powerful over time.